Welcome, everyone, to our 7th episode of Absence Minded. And I have to ask, if you haven't become a loyal listener at this point, I'm really questioning what you're doing with your life. But that's neither here nor there. So,
How are you not
Brycie,
tuning in every month?
I know. So, in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about 2 new Department of Labor FMLA opinion letters that came out in January 2026, very specific to the work that we do every day. Brycie, I'm positively giddy as we get in this new nerd world of leave and workplace accommodations. So, for the first one, Brycie's going to walk us through it, and she's going to talk a little bit about does or can we include FMLA time for travel related to medical appointments, even if the medical certification does not include those commute estimates? So, Brycie, why don't you break down this one for us?
Well, I totally am going to do that. But first, a deviation from our covered content. So I have often wondered how the Department of Labor goes about picking the lucky recipients of their attention in the form of opinion letters. And what I'm pretty sure happened this January is that they heard about our wildly famous podcast and thought we cannot release one opinion letter because there are, in fact, 2 hosts of the Absence Minded podcasts. So you are welcome from Christine and I to be the lucky recipients of 2 Department of Labor opinion letters in January 2026. I asked Christine if I could cover this first one because I'm super jazzed about it. So this opinion letter, in a nutshell, says, hey, employers, if your employee needs travel time to attend their own medical appointments or a covered family member's medical appointments, that's covered under FMLA. And so that in and of itself is very nice to have in writing. But there's a couple of things that I find in that opinion letter that are even more helpful. And one of them really is the notion of we should not be asking our medical providers or our family members' medical providers to tell us as employers how much time I might need for travel time. That is outside of their realm of specialty. And so the Department of Labor did specifically say, yes, travel time to and from appointments is covered. And no, we shouldn't be expecting that our family member's medical provider gives us an estimate of how much travel time is needed. That's really the job of us as employers as we have conversations with our employees to kind of suss out. And so if we find that we have an employee that's taking an exceedingly long time to get to and from their medical appointments, that's a conversation. And kind of a look to see maybe how far away is that appointment that you're trying to get to, or what are the unique circumstances to you surrounding that appointment, and then addressing it from there. It would be incorrect of us as employers to call a medical certification form insufficient if it doesn't address that travel time. So I think that was really helpful. A couple of other things in that opinion letter that I found to be my favorite things about that opinion letter is they do give examples at the bottom of it of kind of the appropriate application of this opinion. One of them that I really liked was somebody needs to take their parent to a medical appointment. That's why they need the intermittent FMLA leave. And as part of that, they have to go pick the parent up from their home, take them to the appointment, bring them back home, get them settled in at home, and only then can they go back to work. And the Department of Labor has clarified for us that is in fact covered. Picking the person up, taking them back, getting them settled in also counts as reasonable FMLA leave. And then the very last example that they gave, which I'm sure none of us have encountered, is an employee who takes time off of work to go to her medical appointment, and on the way back swings through the library and to the grocery store to run some errands on her way back to work. And the letter does clarify and confirm, hey, the time related to getting to and from the medical appointment counts, but the time related to running these unrelated errands does not count. So that time should not be designated as FMLA leave. So that's another just really good reminder of the conversations that we should be having with employees who are requesting this type of leave to just make sure we're all on the same page about appropriate use of FMLA. And then the other thing that was just a really cool, fun, kind of nuts and bolts reminder for me that is in this letter is the Department of Labor's definition of intermittent leave in general. And where I think all of us kind of in general think of intermittent leave as like leave that's taken not in one consecutive block of time. And, we're kind of defining it based on how we enter it into our automated systems, which is, okay, we have to enter this thing in like one absence at a time. So, as long as it's like less than a week, it's going to be an intermittent leave. But this is just a fun reminder of how the Department of Labor defines intermittent leave, which is means leave taken in separate periods of time due to a single condition, illness, or injury, rather than for one continuous period of time. And here's the fun part. And may include leave of periods from an hour or more to several weeks. So that was just just an interesting reminder to me that this is in fact defined in the regulations a little bit differently than how I typically think of it.
I love it. And Brycie, you just had a client ask about this topic in general, I think within the past 2 weeks. And they actually asked about having to travel, I think, overseas or out of
Yes.
the country to care for that parent. And you and I dug into that a little bit as well. So that opinion letter was helpful guidance there.
Yeah, and I think the guidance we ultimately provided there is that travel time to the other country was, in fact, could be considered FMLA time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the second letter that the Department of Labor, as Brycie stated in her theory early on, clearly wrote for the sake of us having two opinion letters to talk about this month is this addresses a common problem for our school employers, which is how to calculate FMLA leave when school closes for less than a full work week due to weather or other disruptions. So we all know snow, ice, I don't know, tornado, depending on hurricane, earthquake. I don't want to leave any part of the country out here. But I think before we really dig in is Brycie and I's interpretation of this, I want to take a pause, is that this opinion letter, while it's written specific to schools, it's our highly sophisticated opinion that this letter has broader implications and could apply to any business affected by partial week closure. I think, in the past 5 years, in particular, with the pandemic and some of the other things that we faced in this country, we've seen issues where work weeks, not just schools, are closing for maybe 1 day or 2 day for really a variety of different reasons. So the lens that we're going to look at this through, again, we're not attorneys, is that this has broader implications to any business. So for this particular opinion letter, the Department of Labor really grounded its analysis in a basic principle. And that is that FMLA is measured in work weeks, and employees cannot be charged for leave they did not actually take. And then from there, the outcome really depends upon how the employee is using the FMLA leave. Are they using it intermittently or are they using it continuously? So in this scenario for a partial week closure, if an employee is on approved intermittent or reduced schedule leave, only the time that the employee would have otherwise been required to work counts against the entitlement. So if a school or other type of business, wherever you work, closes for a day or two, and the employee is not expected to report to work, the closure does not reduce available FMLA leave. If the employee would need to take intermittent time on one of those days in which this business or school is closed. Pretty simple. We see similar advisement under FMLA regulation when it comes to holidays. I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. But when our employee is on FMLA for the entire work week, so again, continuously, the full week is going to count as FMLA even if the school or other business closes midweek. In that scenario, the closure is not going to pause the leave. It's not going to credit any time back. It's not going to change the calculation. And like I said, this is the same way that we see FMLA operate when it comes to holidays. When a holiday falls during a week, in which an employee is taking FMLA for the whole week. The entire week is counted as FMLA. So I am glad that in this interpretation that the DOL gave us, this new opinion letter, that they're interpreting these two scenarios, holidays, partial week closure, the same way. It's less hoops for us to all work through, a little bit easier for us to understand in the LOA administration space.
Okay, now here I'm going to apply my epiphany, my newly remembered DOL specific definition of intermittent leave, because how you just laid that out was kind of, well, if they're on intermittent leave, it's going to work this way. And if they're on continuous leave, it's going to work this way. And then I just saw this definition that was like intermittent leave can be weeks of leave at a time. So I like what I'm taking now is that we're delineating between full weeks of leave and partial weeks of leave, whether or not we could classify that as continuous or intermittent. I feel like I'm going to be on eggshells now with the use of the terms continuous and intermittent based on the revelation I've had here in this opinion letter.
I think, the other thing that I want to spend just a couple minutes on with regards to this opinion letter is it doesn't matter whether the closure was planned or unplanned, or whether the school or business later scheduled makeup days. I think the concept of makeup days is likely more applicable to our school system, because if they have too many days, they may extend the school year. I know our kids all love that. Or again, we're not going to focus on like why the closure occurred. If you have a rat problem and you have a partial week closure, then we're going to look at FMLA the same way as I've already explained. And none of these variables, again, are really going to affect how much FMLA was used. What matters is the structure of the approved leave, intermittent or continuous, and whether the employee was scheduled to work. So
I think it's really cool that so shortly after that opinion letter was released, we had the ability, like especially in the southern and eastern states, to like apply that knowledge head on, because we've had so many school closures related to this winter weather we've been having.
Agreed. Well, that's it. We did the 2, Brycie.
All right. And we're always ready for more, Department of Labor. Bring them at us.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. The information provided in this podcast is for general information and education purposes only. It's not intended to be and should not be construed as legal, financial, or human resources advice. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, laws and policies regarding leave management vary by jurisdiction and may change over time. Listeners should consult with a qualified attorney, HR professional, or relevant expert for advice specific to their situation. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of their employers or any affiliated organizations.